Hello, in previous video we have seen how to create multi-page dash apps, correct? Now over there, if you remember, we used this particular location object and some concepts of callback to create a multi-page app, correct? Now if I just see what we have developed in the latest video, so if I just go back over here, so we developed this kind of very simplistic UI over there, correct? So where we have this home, polls and poll results. So if I just click on polls, so it will basically take you to the polls page where we have an option to go back to the home page as well. Similar thing happens for the poll results page as well, correct? So it will basically have another option over here to go back to home as well. Now in this video, let us talk about interesting stuff. Using this one, basically whatever we will be discussing today, we can get a better idea about how callback works. Okay, now think about this one. When you will be creating multi-page apps in Dash, so let's say polls page, correct? So what will be our intention? So in this page we'll have a lot of controls like drop downs or radio buttons or whatever, like based on your requirements. Now it may happen that for this particular page also, for the interactivity of the buttons, or let's say if you want to display some graphs based on slider, correct? So you need to write some kind of callbacks as well, for which will be basically applicable, basically used by this particular page as well, correct? Similar thing happens for the other page as well. Now in this video we will see how those callback works, and we will also see like if there is any challenge we are facing or not. Okay, and we'll try to overcome that challenge as well. So what I'll do is, in the polls page I will just try to create a simple drop down over here, and which will have very static values for now. Let's do that, and eventually we will read these things from the database as well. So we will create a very static drop down. So basically that drop down will have the poll names, and if you select a particular poll name, so it will basically display the poll question and their options over here. So let's do that stuff for now, because there will be a callback involved over here, right? Because based on the drop down selection, it needs to refresh that question over there. So let us first try to implement the polls page first, then we will work on the callbacks over here. So I'll go back to my code. So what I'll do is, so if you remember, we created three layouts, right? The polls layout, the home layout, and the polls result layout. And there is also a default this app.layout, which is basically by default Dash looks for, correct? So this app.layout is actually displaying this three layout based on whatever we are, based on the location of the, basically whatever link we are clicking, based on that it is correspondingly choosing that particular layout, correct? And that link, whatever we have clicked on, is basically determined by the location object in our browser, correct? So we have written this particular callback over here to handle this one. Now we are trying to add some more elements to the polls page. So this is our polls page, correct? So we are going to add it over here. So it is basically inside the div, we just have a HTML h1 element there and a link element over here as well, correct? To go back to the home page. Now I will just try to add, a couple of line breaks over here, so that our new drop down will be created in a new line and it looks better. So couple of line breaks over here. Now I will just create a drop down. So in the drop down, on top of the drop down, there will be a label called select a poll over here, right? So we can do that using the dash core component drop down object. So we'll see that. So what I'll do is we'll just create a simple div object over here, and inside the div we will, in the children, it's not like that, it's children. Even this is optional as well, so you can directly give this list as well over here, correct? So we have discussed this before. Now inside this div, so as I said, we will be creating two stuff. One is a label and another is a drop down over here. So to create a label, we can just give the string over here. Let's say select a poll, correct? So I will give a colon over here, and the second thing will be DCC drop down. So let us go back to the documentation. I just opened the documentation from the dashboard core component over here only. So if I just show you over here, if you just go to the Plotly dash documentation, so under dash core component, so there is a thing called drop down object over here, correct? So to create a drop down, what you need to do is you need to basically use this kind of stuff over here. DCC dot drop down, you can give a drop down ID over here and the option of the drop down. So inside the option, it's basically you need to give each and every element of the drop down as a Python dictionary over here. If you see it, like the dictionary has two keys over here. One is for the label, which will show in the drop down, and another is for the value, correct, which will basically you will be working on with that particular drop down value, right, in your code. So that purpose, these two things are needed over here. So we will do the similar stuff over here as well. So we will just copy this one. We will say this one, DCC dot drop down. So inside the drop down, I'll just first give a ID. So let's give a ID called, because this one will be needed in our callback as well. So let's say polls drop down. Okay, polls name, let's say polls name drop down over here. So I'll just give it is a dash separated, let's say. Okay, so this is my polls name drop down, and it has couple of options as well. So let's do that. Options, so as I said, it's a list of dictionaries over here, correct? So the dictionary is something like this one over here. So we have a labels and values. So for our case, we'll just simply use some lambda expression over here. So we will have three polls, let's say POLL1 and comma POLL2. I'm just creating just normal strings over here, poll 3 over here. Okay, so 3 over here. So we have these things over here. So if I just save it, and if I just go back to my dash page, let's see how it looks like now. So it should be updating, and if you see it in our polls page, we have a string and we have a drop down with this 3 values over here. If you want, you can give a default value over here as well. So if I just go back over here, so there is a input called value, parameter called value over here. So that will basically give you the default value of that particular drop down over here. Okay, so for now I am just not giving anything over here now. So our drop down is ready. Now whatever I will be choosing it from here, let's say I am choosing poll 1 over here. So it should be displaying the poll 1 question over here. So for that purpose, what I have done is to make things simple. I have taken a CSV file, simple CSV file. So let me show you that one. So if I just go back over here, so I just created a polls.csv file, and if you see, I have kept it in my dataset folder. So you can create a simple folder called datasets. It's not like convention, you can give it any name over here, but dataset looks a meaningful name, right? So that is what I have given it over here. In future videos, when we will rearrange these codes, okay, so we will try to make some modifications over there as well. But for now, our polls.csv file is inside this particular dataset folder, and if you see, I have just taken a 2 polls, poll 1 and poll 2. That is the name I have given in my drop down as well. I could have get the names from this file as well, but I have not, because I just wanted to test something. Like if I choose poll 3 from my drop down, so it should not display any question over here, right? So that is the reason I just given that one. in future anyway we will be reading it from the database. And if you see, it has other columns like the question text and 4 options over here. Okay, so very simple stuff. We will just try to see how it goes. So now to display the question, what we will do is we will read this particular CSV file based on the value, or basically the poll name selected from the drop down, and then under that question we will try to display these options as a radio buttons over here. Okay, so that's the next target. Now to do that, let us think about this one, how we can display a question based on selected value from the drop down. So this is the best case for the callback, correct? So callback means my input will be this drop down's value and my output will be the question. That means that question will be displayed somewhere over here, correct? So that means we can have a div over here which will be updated by our callback. So in the callback we will write the program or routines which will basically create the content of the div. Probably we'll be returning from our callback a form object which will basically bind this question text and the radio buttons together and return it, so that it will be displayed in the div over here, correct? So that means in our polls layout we need to create a div over here now. So let's do that. I'll go to app.py. From here let's display the question in a similar fashion. I will just give 2 line breaks over here and I will just create a simple div just like we did it previously as well, correct? So instead of giving it a same name, I will just give it as polls question div, correct? So that's our div. Currently it will not display anything because we have not written any callback. So let us try to create the callback now. So we will do it in a very similar fashion. We will just, in our callback we will have some output and some input. So let's copy this line over here and create a new callback. We will now, for our callback, the output will be this poll question div, correct? So let us copy this particular div ID over here. So that's my output. That is what I wanted to update by returning some form object from our method. We will create the method shortly. So my component property will be children. That is fine, right? Because for the div, the children property is the one which is holding these things over here, any elements, right? Now what will be my input? My input will be that drop down value, correct? So the drop down ID we have given it in the polls layout page. When we create a drop down, the ID of the drop down is polls name drop down, correct? So that's why we have given the ID of this particular drop down. So I will just give this ID over here. Now the property. So if you are not sure about which property it will be, let us go back to the documentation. I think it is always good practice to see the documentation and try to understand. You will get more confidence. So if I just go to the document for the drop down and see the drop down properties over here, so there is a property called, so these are the properties basically you will be mentioning in your callbacks, correct? So there is a property called value which is basically holds the current value of that particular drop down. So we will be updating this particular property only. So I will write it value over here, correct? So this is my callback definition. Now each and every callback definition needs to have some kind of method attached to it. We have discussed it before. So let's have this method name called, let's give a meaningful name, display poll question, display poll question, and the input will be a drop down value, correct? So let's have it poll I'll just give it the name as poll name over here, correct? Because that is what my drop down is holding here as well. So I will just remove this codes over here for now. Okay, so now we need to return an object which is basically a form object. Now there could be multiple ways you can implement this one. Now I'll show you one way which is easy to implement. Now apart from dash core component and HTML component, so there is another thing called dash bootstrap component as well. Okay, so if you just click on over here, you will reach to this particular page. So to use this one, first you need to do this pip install dash bootstrap component. I think when we initially set up dash, we did that one as well. I think if you have not done, you need to do this one first. Okay, so this defined lot of different component as well, which is basically looks good in your page. So if I just click on this components, now we need to create a form object. So if you see it over here, so there is a component called Bootstrap Form, which basically combines different inputs over here, like the buttons or whatever, the form text or drop downs or whatever it is, like some simple stuff, right? So the way we see in the Google form and all, so this is similar kind of object over here, right? So we will be creating the form object over here. And if you see, and if you just go through this documentation, so there are various ways you can create forms over here. So and if you see, like, and if you see, there are certain examples as well when you want to use this DBC forms, basically the bootstrap component form with the dash code component as well, something like we are using it as well, correct? So you need to do something like this one. You need to basically write something like dbc.form, then you can just create different components like the drop down or slider or range slider as well, right? So we will do similar kind of stuff over here. So we will create separate components, then we add it to the form. Now for our case, it is just the question text and the list of radio buttons for the question options over here, correct? So let us first try to create the form object and then we will fill it up. So first what we will do is we can wrap that form in a div as well and return the div, right? That's our motto, correct? So we'll say question underscore div over here, okay? And what we'll do is html dot div. Now here we basically add the form over here, correct? So what I'll do is here we need to add the DBC form. So for that we need to include the dash bootstrap component in our code. So let us do that. So we'll go up over here and we will add the dash bootstrap component as DBC over here. So inside this question div, we will write dbc dot form over here. Okay, now this requires a list of objects, so that's why I am just giving this empty list over here. We will fill it up. So we will just try to create that question text plus the radio buttons as a separate div and attach it over here, and ultimately we will be returning this question underscore div from our method. So that let's write down the return as well. So return this question div so that this particular component will be updated with that particular question. Okay, so let us try to formalize now. We will come back to this particular code as well over here, this particular code as well, because it is not finished. Here we need to pass that particular question as well. Now to get the question, first thing is we need to read our CSV file, correct, and get the data. So we will be using the pandas over here to read that one. It will be much easier to do that. So first we need to include the pandas, and I think to read that particular file, we need to include our OS module as well. So let us do that. So I'll just copy paste it over here. So I am just importing pandas as PD and importing OS as well. So pandas has a built-in method called read CSV, so we can easily use that one to read my CSV file over here, correct? So let us do that one. So let us create a variable called poll underscore questions underscore df. Df means data frame, because pandas always return as a data frame. So we will use this panda dot read CSV over here. Now this requires, read CSV requires the path of the file. So we will just try to create that path, os dot path dot join over here. Okay, now here first, what is now the logic we can apply over here is this particular app.py we are currently working on, right? So if we can get the current directory where it is residing, then we just need to go inside. From there we need to go inside the datasets directory and just read this particular file, right? So now this particular code will give me the current file. So in Python, underscore file gives us the current file directory paths, right? So that is what I am trying to create it over here. So os dot path dot directory name over here, dir name of underscore file underscore. So this will give me the current path of the app.py. From there I will go to dataset page, correct? So I'll say comma over here, then I will go to datasets directory over there, and from there I will be reading my polls.csv page, correct? So polls.csv file over here. So that is how my pandas will be giving me. So if you just want to know what is the file content, you can have a print as well over here. So let's say print panda question df over here. Okay, so I just saved it. Let us try to see first over here how it goes. So let it do the deployment. Now one interesting things are happening. Okay, a lot of errors are coming up. So let me first fix this one. So I'll go back to my code again and I will just stop this one first now. Okay, so at least you can see it over here, like it is reading from my CSV file, but it is going to the infinite loop. Let us first write our code, then we will try to write it over here. Okay, so we are able to read the CSV file from our dataset folder. Fair enough. Now what I will do is we will try to filter it out, because our aim is to, based on the selected poll name, it should take the corresponding question set over here, correct? So let us do that one. So let's say pandas questions, I'll just create a simple variable again, filtered df. Okay, let's say filtered underscore data frame. Now in this data frame we will just use normal panda stuff over here, like this particular data frame dot loc, and over here we just need to give a condition over here. So let's say this data frame, we will choose that particular row where, so we will choose data frame row where my poll name, because in poll CSV the my column name is poll name over here, correct? So this poll name is double equals to my poll name, we are passing it over here, correct? So str this one. So this is normal panda stuff to filter a particular data frame, correct? So we are just filtering this particular question data frame by using this, applying this particular filter condition over here. So I am telling, like, fetch all those rows where my poll name is my past poll name over here. That means my input poll name over here, which is currently I am selecting from my drop down. Correct. So once I have my filtered data frame, so now I can create that question object over here. So let's name it as question underscore input. You can give any name. So initially I will just make it as none, so that if we have, let's say we are selecting poll 3, which I do not have any entry in this particular polls.csv file, right? So it should return me none over here. So that is why I have initialized with none, and this is the guy we will be passing it in our forms object. So that means this guy will be holding all the necessary object, that means the question text as well as the radio buttons over here. Correct. So what I'll do now is we need to basically form this particular object over here. So I'll first check if not this one, that means this, if this is not empty, if it is empty, anyway I am returning my none object over here, right? None over here. So that means if it is not empty, then I will form that question over here. So let's say question input, this is the same thing, question input equals to, I'll just return a simple div over here as well, div which will hold that two things over here. Okay, so inside the div, first thing is I will be creating a label, and then I will be creating some radio buttons. So we can use the same dash bootstrap component over here as well. So if I just go to input over here, so here you will get a lot of examples of how to create labels, text boxes, everything. Okay, so to create a label, if you see the number inputs, everything is there, labels and text. So label is dvc.label over here. So I'll just create that particular label over here. So this is my this one, and the label will be my question text, which is coming from this question text column from this particular filter drop down. So that is what I will be writing it over here as well. So this is the one I will be writing it over here. So this is my question text. So I have added my question text over here. Correct. So now the next thing is I need to add the question options over here. So for that we can use the radio items. So if I just go again in the same page, text area, select, this is my radio items. So here also you will get lot of options. So let's copy this one over here. Okay, so I'll just copy this, I will keep it over here. Now for us it will be a little bit different. So for us, if you see, like when you want to create a radio items, just like the drop downs, you need to give some options over here, and here the options will be again the labels and values over here. Correct, which you already saw similar kind of stuff when we created the drop down over there. Correct. So in our case the labels are the text, right? So if I just show you the polls.csv, so these are my labels over here. Correct. So this will be displayed as a options in our under my questions over here, right? So let us do that one. So to create, so what will be my label over here? So I already have my this object over here, right? And each and every options I have kept. Currently I have just taken a very static data over here. So I have 4 columns, option 1, option 2, option 3 and option 4. So that means for each and every option I just directly fetch that column value over here. Correct. So I will, what I'll do is from here I will just remove the option 1 and I'll say data frame. From here for this data frame I will just take the option 1 column over here. Correct. So this is the value of the label over here, and what will be the value? I can take any value over here. currently I'm just taking 1 2 3 4 as a value over there. Okay, you can take any values. Now similar stuff we will be doing it for other 3 options as well. So let us remove these guys. Okay, so option 2, option 3 and option 4. For option 2 it will be the option 2 column. For option 3 it will be the option 3 column. For option 4 it will be the option 4 columns over here, and the values I'll be taking is 1 2 3 and 4 over here. Okay, so that's my options. Now I will not choose any value, but you can let's keep this one. Let's say, or you cannot keep that one as well, it's up to you. If I just give value equals to 1, that means by default this particular option will be selected over here. Let's keep that. And ID, I'll just keep this one as well, radio items input over here. So this is my radio item, and this whole things is coming under question input over here, correct? And that question input I am passing it to this particular div, and this particular div I am returning to my page over there, correct? So hopefully now everything should be fine. So let us do that. So now if I just run this app.py, okay, and go back to my page in dash, let it do this one. List of lists. Okay, I think here I have created 2 lists over here, so that's why I think it was throwing some more errors over there as well. So let us try to do that one. Now if I just go back over here, so let it do that one. Okay, now this is fine. So we have removed that infinite errors, because as I was telling you, like I just created 2 lists over here if I just show you the code, like over here I was actually given the 2 lists over here, list of lists over here, but it should be a single list over here. Okay, now couple of points. So if I just select this one, a poll 1, so if it is giving me the poll 1 question and their corresponding options, and by default it is choosing the first option over here. Similar stuff for poll 2 also happening over here. Now if I choose poll 3, as we have written not defined, right? So the default value of this guy, the question input, as none over here, so that's why it is not returning me anything. So it is not displaying anything at all, correct? So now if you see it over here, everything is fine, but here 2 errors are coming still. So let's see that one. It is telling me ID is not found in the layout. So attempting to connect to callback input items to the component polls name drop down. So why these things are, and polls question div, it is basically complaining about these 2 things over here, correct? So why this is happening? Let us go back to our code and understand this. So it is basically talking about the 2 items we have added in our polls layout, the new items, the polls name drop down and polls name div over here, correct? So it did not complain about any other items over here. And if you see it closely, this polls name drop down and polls question div, these 2 things only we have used in our callback as well, correct? So that means whenever initially this particular code runs, so when I run this particular app.py to load my application, it actually runs and validates for all the callback inputs over here. And if a particular element does not exist, because when initially we ran this app.py to load our application, correct? So it looks for this app.layout over there, correct? So now over there it found all these divs, so it did not complain about this one. But when it's tried to run the second callback we have written for the polls page, these 2 elements still not exists that time, because these 2 elements will come into existence when we go to our polls page, correct? So that's it. That is what it is complaining about. Like this two element, it does not exist. So to fix this one, so there is a input or basically settings called suppress callback errors. Okay, so that we need to add it when we will be basically creating that or initializing our app over here. Okay, so if you see it in our tooltip also, it is displaying that particular thing over here, suppress callback exceptions over here, right? So let us add that one. So I'll say comma suppress callback exceptions equals to true. So this will basically tell dash like do not raise any callback exception in this kind of scenarios, because this is a valid scenario, correct? So if I just go back to our page now, let it deploy, and if you see it is still coming up over here. So what we need to do is we need to close these things and we need to basically reload it again. So I'll do that one and I will just run this app.py now. So hopefully this time it should fix the issue. So if I just go to that, load my application now, it should fix this particular issue now. And if you see it, like it does not throwing me any error, right? Even though those two components are still not exist until unless I'm clicking on my polls page. Here now these two components has been created. Even the third component is still not exist, that will be created inside my callback, correct? So when I select this poll one over here, this one is getting created using my callback over there. Okay, so this is how the callback works basically, and this is how you should be using the callback exceptions, suppress callback exceptions as well. Okay, now there are certain concept called validating as well, which we will be discussing in later videos as well. But hopefully this video was helpful in some way. See you in the next video.